time of the week, we're talking matters Africa. Welcome to the show. As always, we're going to be discussing issues that touch on African leadership and development. We're going to get your views on the issues as well. And we have Africa's top 10. You're watching the Africa Leadership Dialogues. I'm Julie Gichuru. This week on the show, we host an eminent panel as we look into matters of social justice and inclusion as well on the continent. Our panel this week, we have with us Dr. Manu Chandaria, an eminent African business leader and the founding chairman of the East African Business Council and the Kenya Private Sector Alliance. He has numerous recognitions and awards and is recognized for his passionate work in philanthropy. Liban Guyo is a governance and development expert with vast experience working in government, civil society and private sector in Kenya, East Africa and beyond. Guyo is currently Assistant Director for Reconciliation and Integration at the National Cohesion and Integration Commission of Kenya. Peter Moll is the founder and president of youth organization Stand Up, Shout Out, which creates projects where youth are able to give back to the community and have a voice. He's focusing on empowering Africa's youth. It's great to have you all with us. Thank you so much for making time for the Africa Leadership Dialogues. My first question is very simple. We're talking about Africa rising. But the next question that follows is, Africa rising for who? So Peter, as the youngest person on this panel, I'm going to ask you that question. Who is Africa rising for at the moment?
I believe the question is the people who are willing to take the opportunity to make Africa rise. Because we have this misconstrued idea that Africa should rise for the youth, Africa should rise for the old, Africa should rise for the poverty-stricken, Africa should rise for the rich. No, it's actually the people who take that opportunity to grab it and make Africa rise themselves.
Africa rising is for Africans themselves. And I think that we need to now recognize that we have power, we have capacity, we have intelligence. Unfortunately, why we are not making that happen? Whatever is necessary, let's make it happen. Africa is rising for Africa and people of Africa, whether they're young, whether they're middle-aged, whether they're old. But it's only for Africa.
As we discuss Africa rising, we know the continent is resource rich. We also have a huge youth bulge. While some see it as a threat, it's also probably our greatest opportunity as a continent. But the benefits of the economic growth, we're seeing some of the fastest economic growth globally, are not being felt by the majority of the populations in many different areas. Where is the gap?
Let me just make a small comment on the first question, Africa is rising. Yes, Africa is rising, and we are saying that out of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world, 7 are actually from Africa. Yes, Africa is rising. It's also it's rising for the Africans, young, old, but then again, it's about also who grabs this opportunity. Africa is not a continent in isolation. The world has become it's a global economy. And therefore, Africans have to be ready, and they need to be given opportunity by the government. Now, the gap, the social economic gap, you see economic growth in Africa. But then again, is this growth really inclusive? Are the poor, the downtrodden Africans really feeling it? In my view, the growth, economic growth in Africa is not really inclusive. One is simply because you see the economy is growing, but because of the selfish leadership. It's the people around the presidency, the elites and the cronies, but you really don't see this growth trickling down to the poor.
We're going to come back to that issue in just a moment. The cronyism, the elites, and the fact that very, very often it breeds the ethnic divides that we see. And yet, if we look at many of our countries and the leaders who've been in positions of power, very often their own constituencies that they served still remain in poverty, languishing. And President Daniel Arap Moi is an example of that, where Baringo, which was his constituency, is constantly suffering perennial famine and people really living in poverty. So I want to question who benefits and who these intimates are around power structures that actually are able to benefit. But before I do that, let's come to the issue of safety nets in society, and the class issue. One of the things that Samosa does, and we know that annually the Samosa Festival is held, discussing issues around ethnicity, around race, and class as well. Now, when we look at class, we live in a capitalist society. The assumption is that each man for themselves. But where there's so many poor people, what are your thoughts on the kinds of safety nets, Dr. Chandaria, that we need to provide for the very poor?
I think presently the safety net are very little, very few. The new constitution allows a lot of things. Rights to A, rights to B, rights to C, rights to D. But giving rights is not, it's easy. But making it happen is very difficult. Now, where do we have these safety nets? Is it the only government? Is it the private sector? Is the people generally? And to me, I think unless all people of Kenya decides that there has to be a safety net, in whichever I can do, where I can care for others, that is the kind of safety net we got to create. Whether it's in education, whether it's in health, whether it's in help, whether it's entrepreneurship, that's kind of safety nets that we got to create. And safety net cannot be created somebody who's going to come and say, here's 50 million and create a safety net. No. And I think government is the center of making very sure that such ideas develop so that it can take care of the poverty that we are seeing today.
First of all, I would like to be honest on the point that what Manu Chandaria just said, that even if you give people 10 rights, 10 million rights, you put in 10 million laws, if they're not enforced, not just by the government, but by a citizen, then those rights are just paper flying in the air. And when it comes to safety nets, I feel that it's not even a mentality of laws or people enforcing it, it's a mentality of morals. And this thing called Ubuntu that I encompass, it's a causa word, Ubuntu. It means I am because we are. Once we just start changing the perception, and the perception of this person is rich, I don't need to feel that I'm safe because I'm not as rich. Once we just changing the morals of not just handing out 50 million, but handing out ideas of innovation and entrepreneurship and actually empowering the youth to actually believe that they can do something and come out, is when we will have a real safety net, a safety net of the mind. That is where I see it.
That's very powerful. We hosted Ndaba Mandela, the grandson of Nelson Mandela, and he said we need a mental revolution, is what Africa needs. So let me come back to you, Guyo, with this whole idea of safety nets and mindsets. And do we have some cultural issues, you think, that across the board need to be dealt with? We have certain cultures where it's a get out there and do it, mentality. We have other cultures where if someone succeeds in your family, they're expected to look after the wider family structure. Do you think this at all affects how we look at success, how we look at work ethic, and how perhaps safety nets should be structured?
Yeah, there's underlying issues with the safety nets. From the cultural perspective, there are certain individuals and certain communities, they feel like, a sense of entitlement, that it is my right, I'm entitled to this. But then again, it's not all about your right. It's also about your responsibility. If you are given an opportunity, you need to grab it, and you have to really work hard. So it's a question of, you take the opportunity and lift yourself by what they say, but by your own bootstrap. So you really have to stand up and work. Because if opportunities were there, and you are provided with knowledge and skills, then I think everybody will be able to live the kind of the life they would like to live.
Stay with the African Leadership Dialogues.
I want to come to the floor now with this whole idea of opportunity, empowerment, safety nets for the very poor. What are your thoughts on some of these issues, especially around the fact that, you know, we are moving forward, but clearly there are those many who seem still to be completely left behind. So we are perhaps in some countries, as the economic performance is improving, poverty levels are remaining the same or are getting worse. So please share your thoughts on this whole concept around how to empower and to grow.
I'm Martha, a social worker. What I can say first, in our community today, we're facing a lot of challenges due to some of the vices or some of the issues that we're creating ourselves. Coming to, let's say, the youth empowerment, we're talking of one, inclusion with the youths themselves. The other one is communication barriers. Do these youths have the necessary information for this empowerment? How best can we hold our duty bearers accountable? And how best can we practice transparency when it comes to at the duty bearers level?
I'm Owalo Cheng, and I'm a social justice defender. The problem with the Kenyan youth is that whether the African youths are in dilemma. They don't know where their right foot stands. Whether to follow whether to rediscover themselves and create their own path, or rather to follow the paths of their ancestors. African youths are trying to fit in, to create a scenario whereby they fit in themselves. Until they discover their right foot, then there becomes a challenge. There is no structures or institutions well structured that can mentor these youths and really rediscover themselves, starting from basic when they're kids. Whether institutions, take a look at what's happening in our primary school, secondary and tertiary level education. Nothing, no structures to develop these people. You get outside there and you just find that now you have to discover yourself and find yourself outside there. How best do you mingle? Until we discover, the African youth discover their right foot on how best, whether to follow the roots of their ancestors or discover themselves and invent their own route, the problem will still lie within us.
I agree with almost everything that everyone said, but especially with the fact of historical ignorance and the fact that we do not realize as a nation where we have come from, what is our heritage, what sacrifices have been made. And I think it's from that historical ignorance that we see a lot of these problems rising. For example, negative ethnicity, economic deprivation. The gentleman before said that colonial policies created all this, and in fact it is very true. But I think we need to take a step back. We have decolonized the country, but to quote Ngugi wa Thiong'o, we need to decolonize the mind. We need to take a step back, need to realize that before we're moving, before we're industrializing the country, we need to see where we're going. We need to forge our own path. We need to decide our own future. And I think it's only by tackling these various ignorances, whether they be cultural ignorances, historical ignorances, or political. We need to start by slowly educating the youth, taking a step back, realizing where we came from to move forward.
On all the points that have been said, I can say that they are very heartfelt. As in, when you see someone speak, you can see it's not just from an education, but from an experience. And I feel like the simple answer I keep giving everywhere I go is that we need to start. We had this forum on Saturday that said, you are the solution. And that's one thing that from the comments, I've not heard, what am I doing? What are you doing? So when it comes to whether it's a social worker who's asking the Wezo Fund, they do not have the right knowledge, what have you done to give them the right knowledge? When in Stand Up Shout Out, we have 40 members, and then we have a wide range of people who come to our events or our projects. And one thing we've realized is that it takes one person to start. It takes you to go and actually change what you see wrong. When you're talking about, what is he saying? He was talking about the social injustice person. He said that basically the youth don't know their right foot. Now, if you don't know your right foot, what have you done to help? Because I'm not going to say, I've done this, but it's a simple start. You have to start and do something. We have no mentors. We have no role models in the sense that people are not coming down and being like, I will be a role model. I will show you the way. It's up to us. We can no longer say we're the leaders of tomorrow. That's one thing that with my team and with my organization, I push. We're the leaders of today. tomorrow has been knocking for way too long. We're the leaders of today. We must take the stand and realize that, fine, there's so many problems. We do know there's so many problems. We've been told every day you watch the news, there are many problems. But what are we doing? What little are we doing? If anyone in this room just did one thing to stop a problem, that's one person's life changed. When we don't have those, like, you have to just link. You yourself have to go down to where you see the problem and just start and try. Forget about funding. Forget about you yourself are the biggest resource of your country.
The first idea is, are we going to keep on complaining, or are we going to take our butt off and do something? And that's where the volunteerism will come. There's no 4 million jobs available today, neither the government, neither the private sector. So first, are you prepared to get up in the morning and do something for this country? Dig a hole and put up a plant. Go to the school, help them to clean up. Are you prepared to do anything? All you are prepared to do is to just debate, speak your mind. But when it comes to doing things, why should Manu Chandaria go and clean Korogocho? Tell me. We have enough youth who can do it. So I think the basic issue is that stop debating, stop issuing how difficult the times are. Times are always going to be difficult. When I started my life, there were 40 people working. And 6 of us, 40 people. We built an empire, 40,000 people, 45 countries. It is doable. It was doable for me. It can be doable for you. But no complaining, doing something. And I think that our youth are sitting tight. Every time an opportunity comes, complain. Don't complain. Get up. Do something. Because if you don't do anything, in 5 years' time, you'll be rusted. And we will have another generation of 5 year, 10 year, did nothing. And those are going to be a pain in the neck. So please, get yourself, do something about it.
Wow, powerful. I see some of the young people in the audience smiling. I'm not sure what those smiles are about. But just to say, you know, Kazi Kwa Vijana, which was a project initiated in Kenya a few years back, right? And everybody said, ni kuchimba, ni mambo ya kuchimba. You know, it's what this is small work. And I thought about it, and Guyo Liban, one of my first jobs was working in a factory. You know, I worked in a factory in university from 7 p.m. at night to 7 a.m. in the morning, standing for a good 11 hours, and with small breaks in between. And then in the morning, I got a little bit of sleep and went for lectures. You have to start somewhere. For social inclusion and for success, there must be somebody who starts at the bottom, but with a view towards moving to the top. Are we as a society expecting far too much, far too early?
Expectation that individuals are from the society and from the government. I think we're expecting a lot from the government. And yes, it is, because the government, controls the economy, the government regulates the economy, the government make laws and the policies, create an environment where all of us can drive. But I want to disagree on the issues of the youths. The youths of today, I think, they are dynamic. The youths have the education. They also have the technological advantage that the earlier youths do not have. And I believe if we really want the youth to make social, political, and economic progress, we have to bring them into the larger realm of the society. We have to make sure that it's not just bringing them, the ways of fund, but to make sure that the youths are at the center of the decision making. They ought to be there. They ought to be their decision making. They have to be, everything about the youth has to be mainstream in everything that we do. Do we have policies? Do we have the legal framework that is supportive of the youth? I think that's the question. I think the problem has been is that all over Africa is that the regimes are not prepared to really empower the youth. The national youth policies, the youth have been struggling to have the national youth policies in place. The Kenyan national youth policy has been, tamacking in the corridors of the parliament for long. South Africa had it, the youths have been struggling it. But then again, I think now the government had recognized that unless the youths are empowered, then it's going to be like a time bomb. If we actually exclude the youths from social, political, and economic process, then what is going to happen is that we are not just denying the youth, but we are denying the society, the innovation, the creativity, and the dynamics of the young people.
Thank you so much. We've started talking about social inclusion, and the issue of youth has very quickly taken center stage. I think the issue of women and gender empowerment as well, similarly, is an equally important issue. So, gentlemen, I would like you please to look into the camera and share your views, first and foremost with African leadership. What needs to be done to ensure that we have social inclusion? And to the African citizenry. What is their role? What are their responsibilities? Peter, I think we'll start with you at that end.
When it comes to African leadership, it starts with oneself, first of all. It starts with the point that you are the solution. When we realize that we are the solution, when we realize that we are the biggest resource to our continent, is when we shall take that step forward. Secondly, to all governments, if you have a social or any youth council in your government framework and there is no person who is under the age of 30, then you're going wrong. If you do not have any framework for the youth to have a platform to do humanitarian work, environment, wildlife, music, entertainment, arts and culture, sports, if you have no framework for the youth in any class, in any ethnic group, if you have no framework for that, then you are starving the youth from doing what they do best, being innovative, creative, and being the leaders of today.
I think the rights are probably given by law, but rights have no value unless and until we take it, and unless and until we prepare ourselves to take the rights. Right means creating an environment for somewhere you are contributing. If you're not contributing, then there is no right to enjoy. The question is that the responsibility with the right is to contribute of wellness of yourself, wellness for the country and the people that you live in with. And I think that Africa we need a borderless Africa. Today, we are not only bordering Africa, but within even Africa, within even a country, we've got borders, A, B, C, D, E, F. That all needs to get out. Who is going to do it? Youth, young people. To change my mindset might take years now. But to change your mindset and put it right is very easy. The question is that get on it, get to it, and make it happen. Let's not talk. We've done it too long. Let's make it happen.
African leadership, I think it's a very important and a valid question. Africa needs visionary leaders. Africa needs selfless leadership. Africa needs leaders who will provide opportunity for its people. Leaders who will put their people first before themselves. And that means that we have to bring on board all Africans, regardless. We are very diverse as a continent and diverse socially as well. We have to ensure that all Africans, regardless of their color, creed, their social status within the community, that each and every individual in the community has an intrinsic value and could be able to contribute something of a value to their country. And therefore, the government needs to provide an environment where Africans can actually thrive. I think if we provide an environment, if African leadership embrace transparency and accountability, if we open up these boundaries to Africans so that they can freely travel across African continents and trade and interact and share ideas, then Africa is going to rise and Africa is going to take its rightful place in the world.
Stay with the Africa Leadership Dialogues.
Passionate discussions here. We'd love to hear your views as well. We'll go to them in just a moment. But remember, the Samosa Festival takes place in August. And to find out more about how you can engage with Samosa and get into some of these critical discussions on class issues, on race, on ethnicity, on religion, on cohesion, go to www.samosafestival.com. You'll get more information there. Right now, let's get your views on the issues.
This week we asked you, how can the continent empower the youth for future prosperity and development? Angela Wairimo says, the education system needs to be drastically revised to promote curiosity, critical thinking, and innovation. The Leadership Growth Foundation says, inspired people learn from the past, but they don't live there. They live in the present, but they don't accommodate it. African youth should be given opportunities to bring out their potential, ranging from agriculture, communication, and information technology. Through inspiration companies, youth get motivated and inspired.
Hi, my name is Alan Livoy, and I'm watching Africa Leadership Dialogues from Ongaterongai. In my opinion, the education system needs to accommodate everyone based on their potential and creativity. Not everyone is book-minded. We need to equip the youth with proper skills, avail opportunities, and involve them in decision-making so as to ensure prosperity and success of Africa as a continent.
To join our conversation, go to our G+ page, Africa Leadership Dialogues, on Facebook, Africa Leadership Dialogues, on Twitter, @AfricaLD, and on WhatsApp, send your video comments to +254 715 816 033.
And now it's time for Africa's Top 10.
On Africa's Top 10 this week, we feature Africa's plans for youth empowerment. Starting us off at number 10 is youth rights and leadership. African governments should advocate for the rights of the youth by coming up with youth programs that will spearhead youth activism and empowerment and instill leadership qualities through leadership workshops. This will go a long way in empowering the African youth. Coming in at number 9 is increased investment in youth programs. Investing in youth programs ensures future generations are well equipped to take up the reins of our continent and propel it to great heights. Sustainable resource base takes the number 8 spot. A sustainable human and financial resource base is critical in ensuring youth empowerment programs run smoothly. This would also see many youth benefit and improve their living standards. Positioned at number 7 is proper institutional representation. When it comes to representing the youth, institutions put in place should be aggressive in championing the youth agenda and the idea that the young generation is capable of leading. Slotted in at number 6 is culture and tradition. Some African cultures and traditions contain vital lessons that the youth can embrace and benefit from. The aspect of respect, togetherness, and voluntarism are all embedded in our traditions, and by propagating such, Africa's quest for youth empowerment will be enriched. Coming in at number 5 is proper health services. The youth make up about 60% of our total population, therefore measures should be taken to ensure they receive the best care available. Having a healthy young nation means that the resources generated by their input is felt across all spheres. Taking the number 4 spot is gender equality. Advocating for the gender equality notion in our society will help unleash the potential that women have and reduce significantly the levels of poverty, improve health and sanitation, and reduce the levels of gender-based violence in our society. At number 3 is good employment. Proper channels need to be put in place to ensure the transition from school to decent jobs for the youth is attainable. Creation of decent jobs, fighting discrimination in the workplace, and fair wages are all imperative. The inclusion of youth with special needs and the marginalized comes in at number 2. Young people with disabilities are often shunned by the society and deemed as unproductive, and therefore left with limited access to education and no room to empower themselves. On the other hand, marginalization faced by youth in an adult society with imbalanced power structure comes in many forms ranging from age, gender, and ability. The two groups need to be included and empowered. And our number 1 this week is access to quality education. By providing quality education at all levels, the youth are able to transition from education into the job market, raise their living standards, gain new insights in life, and in turn strive to empower themselves and those in their region. And that's Africa's Top 10 this week.
It's already time to end the show. As always, we have an incredible proverb for you, and this week it's from Zimbabwe. You cannot tell a hungry child that you gave him food yesterday. Blessings to you and blessings to Africa.